Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches.
Welcome. We're glad you joined us for Encounter, a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that invites us into conversations with and among our faith communities and with our greater community. I'm Jan Marcy. I am the pastor at Endwell United Methodist Church and one of the hosts of Encounter. And today I have with me two guests who represent two different faith traditions. In the month of December, it is a month of celebration across the whole culture, and our two guests today represent two faith traditions in the culture we're a part of. Rabbi Barbara Goldman-Wartell is rabbi at Temple Concord in Binghamton, and Reverend Mark Giroux is the rector at St. Mark's Episcopal in Shenango Bridge. Welcome. We're really glad you're with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe a good place to start our conversation is to talk just a little bit about where these two faith traditions come from. Sometimes we think we know about these faith traditions and don't really understand their origins or how they came about. Barbara, would you like to tell us a little bit about Hanukkah? Where did Hanukkah come from?
Okay. Hanukkah, of course, takes place in Israel, and during the time of the Assyrian Greeks, when they were in power over the country, there was a time of freedom and good times for the Jews, and then a new ruler came in place who was very restrictive and didn't allow worship of anything other than himself and the gods of his culture. And over the course of time, while many people assimilated, there were those who were upset and would not. You weren't allowed to go by the Jewish dietary laws, the worship, the education. You couldn't use Hebrew, the language, and all of that. And so there was, in the end, a revolt. The Holy Temple had been taken over by them and desecrated. And through the revolt, and it was guerrilla warfare.
Oh, wow.
In an earlier time. And the first miracle of Hanukkah is that a small group, the few, were victorious over the many. And it was a fight for religious freedom and all the different freedoms, not only religious freedom, but the freedom for people to follow their own beliefs, traditions, cultures at that time, something which it resonate with us today.
Sure.
When they went to rededicate the temple, to clean it up, the temple had been desecrated and they had to clean it. And the later story is the second miracle, is the miracle of the oil. And they didn't have candles as we have today, but they used oil. And the legend has it that there was one cruse of oil enough to last for one day. And the miracle is that it lasted for 8 days. And so Hanukkah is an 8-day holiday, which we light candles for each day until the last night we're lighting. We have a servant candle that lights the others, so we actually light 9 candles and celebrate it for 8 days. And originally it was oil with wicks, and now we use candles primarily.
And in our calendar this year, Hanukkah and Christmas overlapped, don't they? So there's the possibility that both celebrations are going to be going on at once. Mark, tell us a little bit about the Christmas celebration and its origins, which is kind of embedded in our culture, but as our culture gets more and more secular, sometimes it seems like some of the real reasons for Christmas are being lost along the way.
That's true, Jan. The origins of the Christmas celebration actually don't go back to the very earliest Christian movement. It was probably the latest of the liturgical celebrations to evolve within the Christian community. Originally, what we call Christianity began as a splinter group within Judaism, made up of Jews who had come to believe in Jesus of Nazareth as the Messiah. But over time, more and more Gentiles became attracted to the movement and in fact took it over, and it lost touch with many of its Jewish roots. Christmas was probably the last of the liturgical pieces of the church year to take place. It was a celebration of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ. And the celebrations came from the narratives in the New Testament, which were put together to describe what must have been wonderful origins of this, to us, wonderful person. There were stories in the first century about the birth of Augustus Caesar, And in answer to those stories of wonders and miracles, the Christian community told its own story of the origin of its founder, but they were very different, even though there were some similarities to the stories of Augustus. Augustus' stories were of divinity found in the great palaces. The origin of the Christian story, there was divinity found in the simplest, in the peasants,
Yes.
birth in a manger.
Right.
And it's a very different view of where you find divinity, where you
Right.
find God from Greco-Roman culture. Now, over time, the Christian community adopted these celebrations, but it wasn't really until fairly modern times that anything we would recognize as a Christmas celebration came to the fore. Really, our Christmas celebrations culturally are only about 100 or 150 years old.
Really? I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that's true.
It's true.
You talked a little bit about the oil, Barbara, and you brought some symbols with you. Would you tell a little bit about the candles that have taken the place of the oil over time?
Before I do that, I want to say that Hanukkah is actually a very minor Jewish holiday. It's not found in the Bible. It's
Right.
later than that, and it has become more prominent because of its proximity in the calendar to Christmas. And prior to that, it really is, we add some prayers of psalms in our services of praises, but the ritual is really at home, and that is lighting the Hanukkah menorah in the evening, and you light one candle the first night and more each night. And the rule is that if you're in a place where it's safe, you do it in a public place where people can see, near a window and somewhere like that. But if it's a time of not being safe, then you do it more discreetly. So during the Spanish Inquisition, when people were killed for being Jewish, things were done very secretly. And there are some very powerful stories. I think it's Hugo Green who saved a little bit of the butter or whatever they got when in the concentration camps as inmates to be able to light something. I think often they did it in the latrine, was the only private place, so that they could observe Hanukkah even in the concentration camps during World War II. So the Hanukkah menorah is really the center part of it, and it really is a religious symbol. It's about the rededication of the Holy Temple, and of course the values that I already mentioned about freedom and being able to have independence. It's tied to political independence also of Israel, and it was the only time Israel was independent until it was 70 of the Common Era when the temple was destroyed, the Second Temple, until 1948 when the State of Israel came into existence. So the Hanukkah menorah is the center part of it, and usually you don't blow the candles out, you let them burn to the ground. So one of my family's favorite traditions is to sit and watch the flames and be there until they go all the way down and see which candle will be the last one to go out, and watch the flame go down and then that little poof at the end. And it's just a way also to slow down and be together as a family besides, which in the crazy pace of our lives is a challenge.
Now you brought along with you another menorah.
Yes.
Would you like to tell a little bit about why that's a good thing? And bring it maybe.
Yeah, well, we complain about the commercialization of all of our holidays and our traditions. But one of the nice things that came about is that as we have more issues about safety, and we have the open flame, of course, of the candles, is that students in college dormitories and people who are living in assisted living facilities or nursing homes cannot have an open flame. And so we now have electric Hanukkah menorahs as well, so that you can have the Hanukkah menorah lit and in your window and not have the risk of fire.
Oh, that's a good thing.
So, yeah, so it is nice, and there are more of them out there, though this, of course, is a much newer development.
And those bulbs would be lit one at a time then?
Yeah, you would always have the center one on top lit because that is the servant candle, and you go from right to left. So the first night, and then you would do two all the way up. So, yeah, till you have the whole thing lit the last night.
So in some ways, some of what has evolved commercially has been actually helpful in our celebrations of these traditions.
Yeah, well, I think so. We have LED lights, all these kinds of things now that help also with the candles, I think, and the other traditions too.
Sure.
And it is also, I think, most interesting that all cultures, not just religions, have some kind of symbols with candles and with light. When we're at the winter solstice, when we have the shortest amount of daylight in the year.
Sure. Certainly when I think of the Christian tradition, the candle lighting on Christmas Eve is one of the things that I think many people look forward to more than many of the other aspects of Christmas. Would you say that, Mark? Or?
I do. Light is such a central symbol within all the religions that I'm familiar with. A sort of rough parallel to the menorah for Christians might be the custom that many churches and homes use with an Advent wreath, a circular wreath of evergreen with 4 candles, one more lit each week as we move toward the Christmas holiday. When I was a child, we had one in our home, and that was one of our family times together. We would actually gather, and my father would read something from the Bible, and we would sing together and pray together. And lighting those candles is a sign of the growing light in the world and the growing illumination we hope to receive from our faith. Another custom is many times homes and churches will have what's called a Christmas creche or a manger scene. This is the star that hangs in the manger scene at my church on through the Christmas season. And again, the star is a powerful symbol of a journey and following light and seeking the illumination that our faith can bring us. And it's meaningful, I think, in all traditions.
It's a beautiful star. You brought another symbol too, Mark. You want to talk about
I did.
that?
This one was created by my mother-in-law. I think it's a sort of a rough take on Santa Claus, which I believe everyone is familiar with in our culture. Clergy often rail at Santa Claus because it does seem sometimes to symbolize all that's worst in the commercialization of the birth of this peasant child that we honor. There can be a shaky historical line drawn between the development of Santa Claus and one of the saints of the Christian church, St. Nicholas, who was a bishop in the 4th century in Turkey, about whom we really know very little, but it's said that his red robes as a bishop are what contributed to the look of Santa Claus, and he was known for his generosity to the poor and his love for children. So there may be something of a connection there. I never discourage people from enjoying Santa Claus as a sort of a secular celebration of the holidays, but I think we always need to remind ourselves that Santa Claus, as we know him now, was closely associated with some commercial companies that used him in advertising. However, I also point out that his most well-known incarnation comes from a poem written by an Episcopal priest, one of our guys, Clement Moore, who wrote The Night Before Christmas, that most of us are familiar with.
Well, we didn't know he was Episcopalian.
He was one of us.
Great. Barbara, tell us about the dreidel. That's another one of the traditions.
The dreidel is a top, and there are Hebrew letters on each side, and they stand for the words, a great miracle happened there, a great miracle happened in Israel. An Israeli dreidel says, a great miracle happened here. And so we have the nun, it's Nes Gadol Haya Sham. And so it's to remember the dreidel. There was a time in terms of persecution where Jews were not allowed to study their text, and they could play the game and be talking about it, and that could be almost the guys, and they could be studying and then play the game again as well. But the tradition is that we get to play these games of dreidel. So gift giving was not a part